Everybody was upstairs in their beds. I could hear this crying, and I'm like, no family should have to go through this. No family, no matter what. A suicide is never done. If a farmer can just stop and just talk to anybody. If you can't talk to your wife or your significant other, talk to a salesman, talk to anybody. But anything's better than having the family go through what we've had to go through.
One of the reasons the suicide rate is so high in farming is their general stress levels are really high. Think of how it would be if your great-grandfather owned the farm, and then your grandfather owned it after that, and then your father owned it after that, and now you're going to lose it. So now not only have they lost the farm, but they've lost their identity.
My husband, Larry, he was 6'6", big guy, always was telling a joke, always was very animated. He was very gracious and he's very creative. We never had any money, so anytime it came to a gift or an anniversary gift or something, he'd go out to the garden and pick the flowers from my garden, and then he'd make up a poem, or he'd recite it, or he'd write music, or he'd write a song or something. But he didn't like share his real intimate thoughts. At the time when Larry was kind of really feeling pretty frustrated, I was working full-time. I was also going to school, finishing my 4-year degree, and I was leaving the farm every day. And Larry wasn't leaving the farm. I mean, he was here. And hindsight's 20/20. When I think back, I had no clue that he was to that point. I went to work on that Friday morning, and Larry always called at 9:30. And that day he didn't call. I couldn't breathe because I kept thinking, this isn't happening to me. This can't be happening to me or my kids. As I'm driving, I see the rescue squad coming into Watkins, and they don't have any lights on. And so then I know that he must have died. It took 3 years before I had all the cattle gone, and then we had the machinery auction, and after 3.5 years, then we finally had everything liquidated and taken care of. There was all kinds of people that helped me. I was put in touch with Ted Matthews, who helped me those 4 months. He was a real guy who understood farmers and understood farm life and respected it, but yet at the same time wanted you to understand how it could really suck you in and drain you completely dry.
I started working with farmers in 1993, and I just became Ted, and it was always just the concept of, let's call Ted. Ted knows more about this than I do. I'm the only one in the country that does what I do. I get all kinds of phone calls every day, and they run the gamut from a person who calls and says, I have problems with my finances, do you know who I can call? Calls from wives who say, my husband just won't talk to me, he doesn't communicate. And it's hard because they've been taught that, don't complain. You're a failure if you admit you did the wrong thing, if you bought the wrong time, whatever it was. The shame is overwhelming for them. And what do they do with that shame? Well, they just hide it. They're alone all day. They're working on their farm. So they have isolation issues. Who do they talk to? Well, Their dad didn't talk, their grandpa didn't talk, their uncles didn't talk, so they don't either. And most farmers have no concept of what they can do outside of farming. It just doesn't exist for them. People don't realize how important they are to their families. If a person has attempted suicide or is considering suicide, I talk to them about, if it's the male farmer, how would they feel if their wife committed suicide? Would they be better off? Would they be happier? How about your kids? Would they say, oh good, dad's gone? I focus on the things that we can do. How can I handle XYZ things and let the things go that I have no control over?
After I met Ted, all I could think was, holy crap, I wish Larry could have been here. I wish Larry could have met you. I wish there would have been that time. We can't clone Ted, but we're gonna have to try to figure out a way to get the farmers to talk to somebody like Ted, because Ted can't be all across the United States.
You just don't want to be asked questions, you don't want to admit what's going on, and you just retreat, and bottle those things up.
Is that farmers need as a pin begins to run down at the edges, things just aren't getting taken care of, maybe the animals aren't getting the care that they need. That whole experience has had repercussions, I think has had an effect on our marriage, it's had an effect on how we run the farm, and it really had an effect on what I do in my other profession, because that's really what pushed me into going back to the department. And they said, well, we want you to work on emerging issues. And I said, well, I'll tell you an issue that's more than emerged, and that is the level of stress that farmers are dealing with. The Farm and Rural Helpline is a service that the Department of Agriculture has had for many years. The idea is that it's there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They are trained to help people at various stages of crisis or difficulty, depression, loneliness, anxiety, people who just need somebody to talk to. Farmers are really struggling because they're producing food below the cost of production, going into debt. And for any business, that's a terrible position to be in. And these are mostly family operations, so it's not just the business that's challenged, it's the whole family unit that's challenged. So I think it's a roller coaster, and you just really have to be an optimist when you're a farmer to believe, to go out in the spring and have that excitement of saying, this is going to be the year that everything works well.
Being here on the farm has been very comforting. To me, it's my comfort zone. It's where Larry and I were young and in love and raised our kids. At this point, it's not been something toxic to me at all. It's been joyful. I've just tried to reach out to people, and I've tried to not be afraid to talk about it. I think if you're willing to share that weakness, that makes me a little bit stronger, is how I think.